This box is made out of leopard wood and maple. The bottom is covered with velvet, and I'm going to start by building the hardest part of this box, the legs. So let's get going. To make the legs, I've made a sample. This is a prototype. I made this out of poplar. I've cut it to size, and I'm going to use hard maple to make them with. Now, the important thing is that this has straight grain. I don't know if you can see it. Straight grain on the face and straight grain on the edge. The way I'm going to mark this out is take a flat side, lay it down there, put it to the end, and make it flush with the side of the board, and then just simply mark around it. And I'll do that down the whole side till I have 4. Now, I've marked them out on this side of the board. I did 5. It's always good to have a spare. The next step is to transfer these lines to the edge of the board. So I'll just take a square, put it at the line, and mark that side. Now on the edge of the board, I've clamped it in this vise, and I put this board against here just to hold it, help hold it square, and then you just go around like that on each one. Now I've got it on 2 sides of this board. Okay, now next I'll take it to the table saw and just cut these to length. Next step is to cut this groove in the back of the leg where it mounts onto the box. And I've set my square to 1/2 inch. And I'll come up from the bottom and mark both sides. Like that. Now to keep the router bit from chipping this out at the bottom right here, I'm going to take a saw and just cut a little line right there about 3/16 of an inch wide on each corner. And I'll do that to all of them. Okay, now I've got it's a 1/4 inch router bit, and I've got it set 3/16 of an inch high, and then 3/16 of an inch is exposed away from the fence. And I'm going to run this through. I put a stop that will stop it right there at that mark that we've got. And you need to do this when the block is still square. If I had not cut that little thing with the saw right there, that could have very easily just chipped out. Now I'll just clean up and square up that corner. Now it's time to cut this leg out of this block. I'll cut it as close to the line as I can get, and then after I've cut this piece off, I'll set it back together like that and then cut a second time. So this is what I've ended up with. Got a nice soft curve, sets like that. I like for the top to come to a point right here, so it just kind of blends right in with the box. To build the box, the first step is to cut this 3/4 inch thick piece of leopard wood in half with my bandsaw. After that, I'll run it through the planer a couple times to clean up that rough surface. It's really important with leopard wood, if you're going to run it through the planer, that you have some good sharp blades in there, because this wood grain will pop out real easily. set my blade to 45 degrees, and I've got a miter along the top edge and also one along one end. Now what I'll do is mark off my 7 inches, and I'll cut this at a miter, and then I'll mark off my 4 inches and cut that at a miter. That way I'll end up with a front and an end, and then I'll just use those two with a stop block to get matching parts. I've got all 4 pieces cut to length and width, and now I want to cut the top off, which will be a 1 inch wide. Okay, after I get the tops cut off, it's good to number these, that way the top doesn't get mixed up with the side. With this grain pattern, it doesn't that much, but I just like to do it on all my projects. It just keeps it safer. Now I'm going to number them 1, 2, 3, 4, but when I put the 1, I'm going to put an arrow like that. That means the 2 is going to go on this side. So 2, 3, and 4. Okay, the next cut is to cut the lip for the top to sit down on the bottom, and we're going to cut that on the outside of the bottom and on the inside of the lid. I've got an 1/8 inch dado blade set in here, and it's half the thickness of the wood. I've already cut the dado for the bottom to fit in. Now I'm going to cut the lip for the top to sit on. It's always good to organize your parts on the table saw when you're making multiple cuts. Okay, now after I've cut the grooves, the top needs to sit down on the bottom like this. It completely disappears. The groove has to be cut so that there's a little bit of space between the top and the bottom. That way it sets down tight on this. I took a shoulder plane and just fine-tuned this just a little bit. You could do it with sandpaper, whatever you need to do, but it needs to look like that when it's finished. I've taken a piece of oak, planed it down to an 1/8 of an inch thick, and that's what I'm going to use for the bottom. Time to glue them up now. Just a regular way of doing this. Line them all up against a straight edge. Make sure they're all lined up, and then put the blue tape on the outside. Well, when I was filming the glue up, the camera messed up. But I got a top and the bottom glued up, and it turned out to be pretty good. I like what I'm seeing, how well it fit together there. Now I need to cut a top to go on here. I got to cut a miter all the way around on this. I've got it all cut, trimmed down to get the perfect fit. Works great on there. Now I'm going to glue it up. To put the inlays in the top, I've marked this off in a grid that is 5 inches long for the first one, and then 4 inches, and then 3 inches. That'll give a half an inch at each end. The way I'm going to cut these grooves is with this old Dremel tool that I bought back in the 80s. This thing is old school. It came with this little router base here, and I added this fence so that I can adjust it in and out like this. And this is what I'm going to use. It's got an 1/8 inch carbide bit in it. To cut the pieces of inlay down to 1/8 of an inch to fit down in these grooves, I built a jig, a planing jig, and I used this a lot when I was doing Kamiko. It's a jig made out of pressboard, and I've got runners in here that fit the outside of my block plane, like that. Now, to get the thickness of the piece of trim I'm cutting, I've got an insert that I put in here. I had to build it up with some blue tape to get it exactly 1/8 of an inch. That goes in there, and the piece that I'm cutting will go in there, and then I can just trim it until it gets down to 1/8 of an inch, and it should fit right in those grooves. I've trimmed it down to where there's no more shavings coming off. Let's see if this, yeah, perfect. Goes right down in that groove. All I need to do is sandpaper and round off these ends. Glue is dried, and I'll just hit a few strokes with this really fine adjusted block plane. I don't want to cut into this leopard wood because a plane on this, you got to be really careful because it just pop grain right out of there. So now it's time to add the legs. Pretty good coverage. All right, I can leave that there. I don't need to clamp them. For the tray on the inside of the box, I've machined this curly maple down to a little over 1/8 of an inch thick. And I can get the whole tray out of this much. So that's my next move. Now for the half lap cross sections, I've found the center, and mark right there is the center of that board. And then I'll take a piece of the wood I'm going to use and mark on either side. Now I've got an 1/8 inch blade in my table saw, and I'll make 2 cuts. This cut is for the half lap joint in the center of the grid. Okay, the half lap turned out pretty well, and it fits in there nice. I didn't want it really tight because it's not easy to get in and out. And I'm going to cover the bottom with this another piece of this maple. So I glued the dividers in and then glued a bottom on, rounded all the edges off, and now I put a couple temporary standoffs in here, and this will set down in there like that. So I think that'll be okay. I like that. To start with the velvet lining, I've taken poster board and cut a couple pieces that fit on that and a piece that fits over that. And then I'm using this spray adhesive. And then I'll take the cardboard and I'll just lay, whoop, I messed up, touched it. Once you touch it, you gotta go with it. And that one goes there. Now then I can cut these out to fit the bottom of the box. Okay, I've cut these pieces down to size, and I've got a square corner here. I've measured the inside of the box, and I've put some tick marks here. I'm using this roller cutter and this mat that seamstresses use. If you use this on a hard surface, this will get dull really quickly. But with this, it rarely gets dull. Now, see if it fits. Yeah, I don't want to push it all the way down in there because it's going to be a tight fit and I won't be able to get it back out. But that's what I'm going to do for this and also for the tray. I've cut all the little pieces to go in the tray. Before I move on to putting the finish on it, this is leopard wood, and a lot of exotic woods have oil in them. So if you're going to apply an oil-based finish, those two oils can compete and it can take a long time to dry. What I'm going to do is use some denatured alcohol, put it on a rag, and just wipe it all over the wood. What this will do is it will soak up some of the oil that's close to the surface. Now when these dry, I'm going to give them a coat of shellac. That will seal that oil in there, and then I can put the oil finish on top of that. You can put almost anything on top of shellac. The shellac is dried, and I've buffed it with this foam pad. It's 3M microfine. This works really well for buffing between coats of finish. The finish I'm going to put on is this polyurethane Minwax spray-on, and I'll probably end up putting 3 coats. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like and subscribe button. I've got a bunch of other woodworking videos on my channel, so please check them out. And I'll see you on my next one.